Bonjour, today we are going to look at the reflexive French verbs called s'habiller, which means to get dressed. Okay guys, quite simply today we are going to conjugate a reflexive verb in three tenses. The present tense, the passé composé, which is the past tense, and the future tense. Now, let me tell you or touch a little bit on the reason why s'habiller is a reflexive verb, because in its infinitive form, it has an S in front. Now, this one has an S apostrophe because habiller begins with an H. Okay, so we drop the E and we added an apostrophe. When you see a verb which begins with a S and then the verb, that means it's a reflexive verb, which means that the verb goes back to yourself. Okay, so in effect in English you would add yourself or myself at the end of the verb, but in French we have this reflexive pronouns that we put before. Okay, so you could say I dress myself, but in French we would say je and then me and then habiller. That is exactly the same principle. Okay, he dressed himself. Okay, but in French we would have he and the little word and then dress. Okay, do you understand? Is it okay? Okay, well, let's have a look at what the verb looks like in the present tense. Now, I will say that I would like you to learn how to conjugate a reflexive verb really well, because they become really tough to conjugate, especially in the past tense. But let's have a look first of all at the present tense of that verb. Now, je m'habille. That means I'm getting dressed or I get dressed. Now you would see that the M-E, but in that case M apostrophe, usually it's M-E because the verb that follows usually is not an H or a vowel. Now means me. If you do not have the me, then it is j'habille and it means I dress. So j'habille mon bébé, I dress my baby. Okay, but if you add this little me in front of this verb, then it becomes reflexive. It is all going back to you. So je m'habille. So you would say the same for you. Now, tu t'habilles, you dress yourself. Okay, but the yourself, have a look, is before the verb te. Okay, tu t'habilles. Once again, it should be te. It is not, because habiller begins with an H. Okay. Tu t'habilles, you're getting dressed, you get dressed. Il s'habille, so it should be se, okay, s'habille, he's getting dressed, he gets dressed, okay. He gets himself dressed, okay. Remember, this is reflexive. Elle s'habille, she's getting dressed herself, really. She gets dressed. On s'habille, one is getting dressed or one gets dressed. Nous nous habillons. We are getting dressed. We get dressed. Now, this one is funny because the same subject pronoun nous is the same reflexive pronoun. So we say nous. Nous nous habillons. So sometimes it sounds weird, okay? Now, remember, if you do not have the nous, the double nous, that it becomes nous habillons. We are dressing someone, but we are not getting dressed ourselves, okay? So these reflexive pronouns are really, really, really important. Vous vous habillez. You are getting dressed. You get dressed. Ils s'habillent. They are getting dressed. They get dressed. Masculine plural, okay, or mixed masculine plural. Now to finish, elles s'habillent. They are getting dressed. They get dressed for the feminine plural. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of examples using s'habiller, to get dressed, okay? Alice s'habille avant de prendre son petit déjeuner. Alice gets herself dressed before having breakfast. Les enfants s'habillent très vite pour aller à l'école. The children are getting dressed really quickly to go to school. Okay, now remember that because it has this little reflexive pronouns before the verb, we know it reflects back to them. Okay? Now, passé composé, the past tense of s'habiller, is tricky. Why is it tricky? Because in the past tense, verbs which are reflexive are used with the auxiliary verbs to be. Okay, so quite often, and I'm sure I've told you before, that when you form a passé composé, you use either to have and to be, either, okay, depending on which kind of verb you're using. But in this case, okay, it is a specific verb, it's reflexive, so it has to be used with to be. Most of the time, it's to have. In order to be able to do that, you must know how to conjugate to be in the present tense. I am, you are, he is, and so on. In order to do that, you go like this. Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. So if you know that, all you need to do is add the proper reflexive pronoun before that verb. So you would say, je me suis, and then use the past participle of that verb, reflexive verb, habillé. Okay, je me suis habillé. I got dressed. Okay, now the next one, tu and then te. Tu t'es habillé. You got dressed. Il s'est habillé. He got dressed. Elle s'est habillée. She got dressed. On s'est habillé. One got dressed. Nous nous sommes habillés. We got dressed. Vous vous êtes habillés. You got dressed. Ils se sont habillés. They got dressed. Elles se sont habillées. They got dressed. Now have a look at this. Why do you think I've added sometimes an S, sometimes a double E, sometimes a double ES? Well, because it is all about the subject you're using. Think about it. Is the subject purely singular? Is the subject singular feminine? Is the subject a masculine singular subject? Or is it a plural feminine subject? It all depends. So whatever subject you're going to do, you are going to agree that in the past participle. So the past participle is going to agree with that subject because you're using to be. Okay, it would not work if you were using to have. But here we've got rules. Okay, we are using the verb to be, so therefore you need to agree. Past participle and subjects. Okay, hence why the last habillé is double ES, because elle is plural, but it's feminine as well. So we add an E for the feminine and an S for the plural form. So the same example is Alice s'est habillée avant de prendre son petit déjeuner. Alice got dressed before having breakfast. Have a look. Okay. Les enfants se sont habillés très vite pour aller à l'école. The children got dressed really quickly to go to school. Now remember that les enfants is they, okay? And it's il. And il goes with se in a reflexive form. But in the past tense, it goes with sont as well. So ils se sont, which is they are, okay, in the present tense. And then you add the verb past participle of that verb, habillé, okay? Now let's have a look at this verb again in the future tense. So we are going to learn how to say I will get dressed, you will get dressed. Now quite simply, you keep the verb as it is and you add those special future endings. Et, a, on, et, and on. Okay? So, je m'habillerai, I will get dressed. Tu t'habilleras. You will get dressed. Il s'habillera. Elle s'habillera. On s'habillera. Okay, so il, he, elle, she, on, one or we. Now you will notice they are always conjugated the same way. Okay? For nous, it's rond. So nous habillerons. Vous habillerez. So we will get dressed. You will get dressed. Ils s'habilleront. They will get dressed. Elles s'habilleront. They will get dressed. Okay? Now let's have a look at the same example conjugated in the future tense. So we want to say Alice will get dressed before having breakfast. We would say Alice s'habillera avant de prendre son petit déjeuner. Les enfants s'habilleront très vite pour aller à l'école. The children will get dressed really quickly to go to school. Okay, so I know that's a very intensive lesson, okay, and it's not easy, okay, but try to remember one thing is that two things actually. When you use a reflexive verb in French, we don't have such a thing as myself, yourself, okay, at the end of the sentence. We put it before the verb. So for je, it's me, for tu, it's te, for il, it's se, for nous, vous, il, se. If you know that, then anything follows. Any verb could follow. Instead of saying je regarde, I look, you could say I look at myself. Je me regarde. You see? So it all depends on that tiny little reflexive pronouns, okay? And the second thing you need to watch out for, which is the hardest, I find when I teach my pupils here in London, it is the hardest. The hardest thing is that you must be able to put this verb in the past tense. In order to do that, you must know by heart how to conjugate the verb to be in the present tense. Okay? Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. That's it. Okay. Now remember that you have a super guide available for this lesson at learnfrenchwithalexa.com, my awesome website. And why don't you subscribe to Learn French with Alexa, the YouTube channel, where I post all the time new lessons, which are like awesome. Can I say? Is it?
It's okay the way you pronounce it.
Okay, that's not a swear word, is it? Okay. And that's it for me. Au revoir. À bientôt. Bisous, bisous.